Thank you so much. Absolutely no pressure for being the first speaker. Really, no, not at all. And I wish you all had your chai. That just puts a little bit more. So taking on what Mohit already said, everything happens for a reason. And if you have been, or if you know of children who have always lived their lives on the works of Shakespeare, especially if they're ICSE students, and our nose is somewhere else. Which city, I don't know, but not definitely here. Rome has so much of an importance, and that eternal city literally is like a place of pilgrimage. Personally, for me, I was extremely fortunate that work also gave me a chance last year to go to the city of Rome. And apart from, the age that I come from of Lonely Planets and all of that, that's all given away now. That, Lonely Planet is not the cool thing. And what is it that you would have when you go to a place like Rome, which in your mind is everything which is Julius Caesar, everything else which, reeks of Rome? You needed to have, at least personally, I needed to have an authority with me for the duration of the flight, so that when I land into that city, it was literally like, when the players walk into the field, you touch the ground and you really feel you've arrived in more than one ways. I can be very dramatic about it. I can even confess I had tears when I landed there as well, but that's what happens when you're a literature student. The book S.P.Q.R, and I'll try and get this pronunciation right, stands for the Senatus Populis Romanis, or very simply put, the Roman Senate and people, or more freely, and what is a little bit more common, called the Senate and people of Rome. Per se, it is an emblematic abbreviated phrase referring to the government of the ancient Roman Republic. And this book has been authored by Dame Mary Beard and was published in 2015. Now, personally for me, when we were looking at many things that would really help us when we spent time there, it was to look beyond the Sistine Chapels of the world. It was to look beyond the Vatican cities of the world that were all there, but really get, if I can, under maybe if not the skin, at least under the drain, if possible. And if you have seen this enough, SPQR for me once, I couldn't understand why was it on all places, including the drainage covers. And I was lucky enough to find actually near original ones, near the Colosseum as well. And given our work schedule, we went early in the morning at 4:30, late in the night, and we were able to take at least a pretty good shot of it. Coming to the book starts to reiterate, and it actually starts with a very emphatic reiteration that it is about how Rome grew and sustained its growth. It really doesn't delve into the decline of Rome per se. So really, when you look at each of the chapters, there's a fair amount of knowledge that you glean away from it in terms of how this whole thing has been working for them. Personally, I was surprised that London, as the capital of United Kingdom, has a connection with Rome, because it was their capital when it was Britannia, which was their extended province as well. The book per se, again, has 12 chapters. I thought instead of just going through all of them and summarizing, though I think while summarizing, after reading the book a couple of times, even as a run-up to this, I was reading a lot more of the reviews and takeaways as well. I think I will spend time on about 2 or 3 chapters with some notes and what also have been highlighted in the book per se. The book opens in 63 BC with the trial of Catiline, and the chapter is titled Cicero's Finest Hour. We all know that Catiline was prosecuted by Cicero for his attempts to stage a rebellion against the Senate and was ultimately killed in battle. Cicero, also known to be a great orator, was likely keen to achieve glory and status through this particular prosecution. Now, while the chapter delves on a lot of this conversation and how this entire, if I could say, the discussion panned out, what was interesting personally for me to pick up from there was, now the word candidate derives from the Latin word candidatus, which means whitened. I couldn't but pause to think the word whitened and candidate going together, especially fresh from a lot of political drama that we've been witnessing, whether it's here or in Maharashtra per se. In addition to that, what also got me going was how it was linked to the second chapter, which is titled In the Beginning. And again, when I was thinking of this chapter name, going back to what Mohit was talking about, the influence of social media, there is a meme that does the rounds about in the beginning, where a gentleman really stumbles upon that. I still could not get past that, but I had to bring my focus back and not get distracted, because this particular chapter talks about the mythological origins of Rome. The city was said to have been founded by Romulus, who killed his brother Remus in an argument in the city's very early days. In fact, the entire forum and other places have so many references to it, and it's not very easy to literally touch it, given the kind of both ancient spaces that they are and the kind of security. But if one were to think of themselves, even in living in those times and days, it becomes extremely important for us to even think when the line in the book says, and I quote, "The message is clear. However far back you go, the inhabitants of Rome were always already from somewhere else." So I believe that there's not just a connection between Rome and Bangalore and so many of the other cities just by gold, but even the fact that today we are all migrants in more than one ways. The third chapter is really dedicated to the entire kings and, if I could even say, the regal period in which the kings of the settlement were really looking at how do they enrich this entire empire. But also, apart from the amount of investment they made to sustain and really augment this growth, it was marked by a fair bit of conflict too. Moving on, I think another important chapter personally was chapter number 6, which is titled New Politics, because it's all about the period between the defeat of Carthage in 146 BCE and the assassination of Julius Caesar in 44 BC. The period was definitely a high point for Roman literature, art, and culture, but again, a high point, or in fact a low point, for the moral and the political decline in Rome. Last but not the least, I think the chapter number 8, which is titled as Homefront, really delves into a fair bit about the typical lives of more ordinary Romans as well, where marriage, while being a large part of Roman life and creation of children extremely essential, it was assumed that and expected that all women would marry, though Roman women held, by relatively speaking, greater amount of rights than the other women. Weak or disabled babies, courtesy the childbirth, which was most often dangerous than otherwise, would be abandoned. Again, very extreme conflicts that you get to see in the way where women had so many rights. Women did have a fair amount of say, but when it comes into taking care of their children, who nearly and always could not really be able to speak for themselves or fend for themselves, they hardly could do or say anything. Let's look at what's happening around us. And again, I think there's so much for us to draw parallels. So at the end of it, when we go into the epilogue, because these are 12 chapters, and personally, you can treat each of these chapters individually. You really don't have to read them in a sequence. You can go use it as an encyclopedia, come and pick in and out of it. At the end of it, really, this is where the epilogue also concludes, that all said and done, when we are thinking about Rome, it's not just about learning about Rome, and that's what the author wants us to walk away with as a thought from this book. It's how you are engaging with this entire Roman history. How are you engaging with each of these acts, like we all know, continue to hold their sway on and each one of us today as well. So definitely, all roads continue to lead to Rome. Thank you.